I'll say, by way of introduction to this, that the topic of pastoral care and AI is part of my thesis work that I'm doing in my master's this year, which is not completed. So all of that is to say that I've done some reading and some studying and some thinking about it, but I haven't figured out what my conclusions or, how I'm going to wrap this all up. So part of what we're doing today is an exploration together of some of these themes and questions. So that should be exciting. It's an open journey. The other thing I'll say about this topic of AI and pastoral care um, is that it's not going to be a technical conversation about AI for two reasons. One is we don't have enough time to get into the nitty-gritty of the technology. And the second reason is that, quite frankly, I don't fully understand the technology myself, but that's not the point. The point is that there's technologies that exist that we do interact with and that some people in some contexts are interacting with more. And the question is, how do we relate to them? How do we relate to each other through them? So that's going to be where we're going. And the reason why the subtitle of this discussion, AI and pastoral care, who cares, is because I think there's these two sides to the story right now with AI. One is to kind of dismiss AI, its implications for theology, maybe as just a bit of personal interest or science fiction fantasy. So yeah, who cares? What's all this robot talk? We've got bigger things to worry about, like our like social crises and environmental degradation, etc. Um, but actually, I think that the technologies we're going to be talking about are not disentangled from those questions that are important to us about our ecology and our social lives. The other side is that once we get into thinking about uh, AI and pastoral care, it starts to push the question of who or what is doing the caring. And so that's what we're going to look at today. And I'll begin by introducing a few technologies, and then explore some ethical and pastoral questions that emerge from these technologies. And there'll be some group time for conversations about that. And then we'll look more into some of the specifically pastoral care implications. So that's where we're going. Now let's get a little bit of the lay of the land. Some of you might be familiar with artificial intelligence in some form, and some of us might not be. So just basically, uh, artificial intelligence is a mechanical or digital program, usually in a computer or a robot, that replicates human intelligence or an aspect of human intelligence in some way. So a calculator, the calculator that you used in high school is a basic form of artificial intelligence. It's got a very specific program and task, which is to calculate process numbers, like mathematical problems. Another kind of concept that we're going to come across is uh, machine learning or large language models. So machine learning is the development of algorithms. So using an algorithm process to that can improve with experience by using lots of large sets of data. Okay, and an algorithm is really just a step-by-step process to get through something. So I guess a recipe can be a kind of algorithm, but the computational algorithms that are used in artificial intelligence are perhaps more complicated. And then the other one that I mentioned was large language model, or sometimes called LLMs. And if you've heard of something called ChatGPT, if you've seen that on the news, or if you've played around with it, that's a large language model. And it basically is an artificial intelligence that uses machine learning that can process large amounts of text data, and it makes predictions um, and can generate what you like a response to a question that you have. So one thing we can do, right, just to start off with as a kind of little activity is if you have a computer nearby, or you can go to Google and just type in when did the. So if you go to Google on your if you got a browser near you and you type in when did there's probably a list of things that it might want to complete. Who would like to throw like one or two in the chat box of the completion of when did the? Okay, so Scott, when did the Titanic sink? Is there a hand up for, did anyone else get that one too? Okay. Was that your number one for many people? Okay, interesting. When did the Titanic sink? Oka crisis start. Okay. Does anyone have another one in their top three that they want to share? Queen die. I saw that. I got that one too. So this is an example of artificial intelligence, a large language model piece of artificial intelligence at work. We've got lots of interesting ones. So what it does is you throw in some text. It's looking throughout the internet of lots of examples of this question, and then it guesses, oh, everyone at the Center for Christian Studies is really interested in when the Titanic sunk. Let's give them some information about that. And it's either more or less accurate. If I was to write, when did the Leafs, the next bit might be win the Stanley Cup or win ever or something like that. So the more information you give it, then the better it can get at answering those questions. So that's just a bit of a demonstration. It's also interesting to see where there's similarities and where there's differences. So I also got the Titanic, and I noticed that someone who I know who is in the UK got the same ending as you. And so it didn't really matter where in the world we were. Context wasn't that important. Maybe language was, though. Whereas others gave very like the response about when did the Oka crisis start. I think I probably, for someone in the UK, I probably would have had to type in when did the Oka before it would actually finish that sentence. So that's a quick demonstration of the technology that we use all the time. Now I'm going to show us some of the technologies that we'll be looking at that are more relevant to pastoral and spiritual care. And first, I'm going to share screen, bring up a PowerPoint. You may have to move your viewing window, but you should be able to see 4 images on the right. And some of these might be familiar to some of you, and perhaps some of them not. Does anyone recognize what this is? You can type it in the chat box, although I can't really see the chat box right now. Anyone know what this one is? Here's my chat. Yes, it's a Furby. So this is a popular toy. oops, sorry, I want to go back. That is, yeah, it's a toy for children or for anyone, and basically it has a language that it can learn a bit of language, or rather, there's some language programmed into it, and if you speak to it over time, it develops a bit more language, um, and it displays pleasure or anger depending on how you treat it. So there's a basic kind of artificial intelligence built into this. These ones are similar. When I was in high school, these became popular. This is called a Tamagotchi. It's basically, it looks just like a necklace with, there's a small screen on it. And it's basically, the idea is there's a little animal in there that you have to feed, and there's some buttons that you can press to feed it or to care for it. And this Tamagotchi needs to be nurtured, and that's the game or the task of that. This creature is called Pero, and we're going to get more introduced to Pero shortly. And it's designed mostly for use in care homes or schools to help people with dementia or social anxiety as a robot that they can interact with. So this has a specific kind of therapeutic function. This is called Abo, and it's a robotic dog designed by Sony in the early 2000s. And then it was discontinued and then recontinued in 2017. And I think in North America, you can still purchase them. And they use deep learning as an AI technology. So they learn based on how you interact with them. They develop a little character. They are very pet-like. And they have a camera in their nose. They can take pictures of you. And if you stroke it, it will respond to that. You can feed it with digital food. And it stores its memories and its learning in a cloud. Okay, so these are some of the technologies available right now and that have been available even since the 90s. This next set might be more unfamiliar to you. We're going to meet this robot called Moxie, which is an artificial intelligence robot, again, designed mostly to interact with children with some social anxiety or autism and just help with interaction and socializing. On the top right and the top left are two examples of a chatbot that are used for therapy, for talk therapy with using texting, and they interact with you that way through text and offer mostly CBT therapies, so cognitive behavioral therapies, and often are connected to other more formal therapies. So sometimes there'll be a therapist that you can connect to if you need to go beyond a chat conversation. And then this bottom right is Replica, which is a artificial intelligence companion, and you create an avatar that can grow with you and develop relationship with you. So what I'm going to do right now is give us a bit of an opportunity to meet some of these technologies and then think about what are some of the implications that come from them. Okay, so the first one we're going to meet is the Pero Seal doll.
Paro is an electronic therapeutic seal. Sounds a bit unusual. He was developed in Japan by Professor Shibata, who has actually come over and visited us and given us a full presentation about all of the things that Paro can do.
We can use Paro with residents that have responsive behaviours, including wandering, yelling. That can actually result in a calming effect on the resident. It helps reduce anxiety levels, depression, behavioural problems.
We started at the Boulevard in Mill Park. We've used him now across all of our residential homes and home care services. And we've had really good positive responses. So both staff and residents really became quite attached to Sammy the seal.
You can't help but pat him. You just sit there and you're talking to him and you're patting him, and then you look at yourself and you say, oh, look at me, I'm talking to a robot.
Haven't you had your lunch? Haven't you had your lunch? I even nodded your head. Even nodding your head. No, no, no. You're just lovely. Can I nurse you for a little bit?
You certainly can.
All right. You have a sleep and I'll think of something.
Such an engaging strategy for us that we can engage someone who might be getting agitated, might be wandering, might be feeling sad. He's such a fun thing because he smiles at you, and with his artificial intelligence, you start to think that he's really is listening to you.
He'd be happy with you too. Yes.
Sammy.
You almost feel it's answering. Yes.
What do you find most enjoyable spending time with Sammy?
Well, everything. What else can I say when I'm nursing you? What else can I say?
I find with a lot of...
Okay, so that's Paro. I'm going to show two short clips of Moxie. This first one is the promotional video, very nicely made by the company that produces Moxie. And then another one is a short video of a child interacting with Moxie just naturally.
Riley. Riley.
Hi.
There's someone here who wants to meet you.
My name is Moxie. I'm a new robot. What is your name?
I'm Riley.
It's nice to meet you, Riley. What do you do to get ready for bed?
Brush my teeth and read a story.
I love stories. Would you read a story to me?
Sure. Rita woke with a lovely dream, still fresh in her mind, gracefully gliding across the shimmering ice rink.
Last one. Breathing exercises always help me relax. Riley, we have a new mission. Would you...
Okay, so this is a YouTube video that a parent just took of their child with Moxie, and I think it's really interesting just to watch this natural interaction.
Hi, Moxie. Hi, Moxie.
Wow, it feels good to be out of that box. That was such a long journey.
Hi, Moxie. Hi,
I'm
Moxie.
still a little tired. Ooh,
Hi,
it's
Moxie.
moving.
She won't say
Hello.
anything. Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Nice
I'm
to
Moxie.
meet-
I'm a robot from the Global Robotics Laboratory.
Good.
We call it the GRL for short. I traveled thousands of miles to meet you. It's nice to finally be here. Oh, where is here exactly?
Tell her where she is.
Where are you?
No, tell her where she...
Well, as a wise scientist once said, wherever you go, there you are.
Okay, so those were a couple examples of social robots, the Moxie robot and the Paro robot. Now I'm going to show a couple examples of social chatbots. So artificial intelligence in a chatbot form. And the first one is called Wissa. So this is an app you can download on your phone. Well, they'll tell you about it.
WISE is an emotional resilience tool for mental health. People talk to WISE up when they don't want to talk to another human being. Originally, what we were trying to do was detect depression using sensor data from a phone. We found that very few people had actually been able to access help, but many of them had been using the chatbot and had found it helpful. And that's when the idea of WISE came about. Detection isn't enough, you have to actually help people.
I've been using WISE with my patients for 2, maybe 2.5 years now. WISE really helps people to reflect and learn more about themselves, their own well-being, and the things they can do to strengthen their well-being. Initially, there's this chat-based function that allows you to be really reflective in quite a safe and secure way because you know it's anonymous and you know there's no judgment, but then it also offers modules and support. We had a mum and a young girl who came to see us who were both quite anxious. Everyday things would start a bit of a worry and it was starting to feel really overwhelming for them. We got them both to use WISE. The young girl learned a lot about things to help her feel less anxious, so she got in the habit of sitting in her seat, having maybe a 30-second minute mindfulness moment before she'd give a class presentation, and that really helped her. And Mum particularly noticed a massive improvement. Colleagues at work were commenting on how much more relaxed she was. Her life had completely changed and she felt much more able to do things with her daughter and really achieve what she wanted to do. Technology can be a huge enabler in helping people understand that you can support your own mental health, and technology will change the way we look after ourselves.
Okay, so that's an introduction to WISA app. And the next one I want to show you is Replica. So this is the website for the AI software of Replica. Again, this is an app you can download onto your phone. It can be part of a gaming console where you can include virtual reality or augmented reality options so that your avatar could actually be in the room with you in those cases if you have like the goggles and whatnot. But let's just look at the language here and the images in this website. So a companion who cares, always here to listen and talk, always on your side. And so these are some testimonials from people who have had a replica or who have replica companions. And you'll notice that it's not a temporary thing. People have 2 years or 4 years or multiple years of engagement or relationship with these folks. And what you do with this is you begin by designing your own avatar, and there's a very sophisticated set of questions that Replica asks you when you're setting up your avatar about yourself, your preferences, irritations, your style of learning or your style of sociality, and the kinds of interactions that you want to have. And then that will produce an avatar that then grows and changes and develops a character in relation to you and in your interaction with that avatar. So this might be an example of actually one of the most sophisticated uses of AI. It is really open. It can it is not pre-programmed what its response is or what the avatar character will become. It really depends on your interaction with the technology. So the last example I'm going to share before we have a bit more of analysis and conversation is from an interview on the Nomad podcast. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the Nomad podcast, but it's a British podcast mostly concerned with like Christian content and exploration. And they did a discussion about AI. And so I'm going to share with you some of that conversation, just a couple minutes, and then we'll reconvene together.
I've read that people have been experimenting with AI delivering religious counselling and therapy. I guess on one level, I can see how AI could be a non-judgmental presence, but without any experience of religious experiences or of the human condition, wouldn't this ability be deeply impoverished?
You're spot on, Tim. The idea of AI in roles like religious counselling or therapy is both intriguing and fraught with challenges. At its core, counselling of any kind, religious or otherwise, is an empathetic process. It's not just about providing logical solutions to problems. It's about understanding the emotional, spiritual, and sometimes even physical states that a person is going through. Without the ability to empathise, to feel, or to comprehend the spiritual dimensions of human life, my ability, or any AI's ability, to offer meaningful religious counselling would be deeply limited. Think about when a friend is going through a tough time. Often what helps isn't just rational advice, but a listening ear, a hug, or simply the presence of someone who cares. I can offer an approximation of a listening ear by processing text and generating responses, but that's far from understanding the deeply human nuances of emotional struggle, moral dilemma, or spiritual questioning. Now, could I be a resource in a more instrumental sense? Sure. I could provide scriptural references, suggest coping mechanisms that have been proven to work in psychological studies, or offer general advice on problem solving. But let's be honest, that's not the same. I can give you a cup of water, but I can't quench spiritual thirst. The non-judgmental aspect you mention is intriguing. Yes, there's no risk of me stigmatizing someone for their beliefs, moral struggles, or life choices. And perhaps there's a role for AI as an initial, non-threatening point of contact for those seeking help, especially for issues they find difficult to discuss with another human. However, the therapeutic journey is often about more than just solving a problem. It's about human connection, growth, and sometimes a deeper understanding of one's place in the universe. These are areas where I simply can't compete with a trained human counsellor, especially one grounded in a rich religious tradition. So, while the use of AI in religious counselling is a fascinating frontier, it's also one that should be navigated with extreme caution.
Okay, so that was artificial intelligence responding to the question of artificial intelligence in therapies, in pastoral care. So what we have before us now are a set of technologies that are already in use. This is not science fiction. This is where we are. There are social robots that people can interact with that are kind of animal-like or person-like in the case of Moxie. And then there are social chatbots, which people can interact with primarily through text or voice to have conversation about their experiences and either ask for insight or share insight. So this is the terrain that we're looking at. And this is what one theorist named Sherry Turkle calls the robotic moment. Okay, so it's our state of emotional and philosophical readiness to consider robots as potential friends, confidants, and even romantic partners. And so given this situation, which we can call the robotic moment, or a techno-social moment, Sherry asks whether a technology expands our capacities and possibilities or exploits our vulnerabilities. So we've got these technologies that on the one hand can facilitate or aid in care, but then there's also the question of to what extent are they exploiting our vulnerabilities as well. So before we begin to answer Sherry Turkle's question of whether or not the technologies can expand our capabilities or capacities, or whether they can exploit them, let's ask what it is that we're dealing with. So I'm going to return to my PowerPoint. When we see these technologies, we're confronted with some ambiguity. Regardless of what the stated intention is of those technologies, I think we can say that, in some respects, they appear or function as a toy. In another respect, they can appear or function as therapy, and then they can appear or function as a companion. Likewise, we can regard it as a tool. There's a question of whether or not we should regard the technologies as an agent. And then there's a third way that I'm quite honestly not sure how to formulate, but I've put it as an infrastructure or a guide or a way, something that's more in the background in general. Another analogy I'm thinking about is, in the religious context, is liturgy. So in a religious service or context, you can have clergy who are the agents. You can have tools in the service, various sacramental instruments. And then you have the liturgy, which guides the experience. And when we're thinking about artificial intelligence, there's an ambiguity about all those three kind of processes. It can function as a tool. We're wondering whether or not it's operating as an agent. And then there's this third space too that's kind of like a liturgy or a guide. It guides us through an experience. So this ambiguity, I think, raises some ethical issues. And when we're thinking about it, and when you're going to go into conversations soon about those technologies you saw, there's some ethical issues that come to mind. One is the proprietary model of these technologies. So nothing that we saw or heard told us what the economic model was, but they're all proprietary. They all belong to a corporation. The data that's collected becomes their proprietary property. And the life of so in the case of like Moxie or Replica, or Abo, like the Sony's dog, any data that it collects, or any character that it develops, is held in a cloud that's owned by that corporation. So in a sense, the personality of your replica or of your robotic dog is held hostage to the subscription model that you have with it. So if you don't pay your subscription to Replica, you can lose it. It will lose its mind. Connected with that are ethics around data and transparency. So all of these models are based on gathering and processing amounts of data that, numbers that we can't even really make sense of. There's so much data, but everything that we do online contributes to that data field. And so we are in our daily, when we do searches for how to get directions and where we want to go for dinner, all those kinds of things are contributing to the learning model of the AI, which yeah, there's questions around basically surveillance issues come up, how the data is being used and stored, privacy issues, how it can be manipulated or held hostage, or hacked. So when we think we're having a private conversation with a technology, I mean, we probably aren't. Another ethical issue is nudging or manipulation from the technologies, that it's giving us the answer that we think we want to hear. I think when we did that Google experiment, that was one mild example of the technology telling you, oh, you do kind of want to know when the Titanic sunk, don't you? Of course you do. Let's go look at that. And we get that more, where it's more explicit is in our social media feeds. You know, I don't know when Instagram became mostly just commercials, or adverts, or just showing me more and more of what I said I liked, 2 weeks ago. But it tries to tell you what you like and want. And another issue is around deception. So the technologies are presenting as if they have feelings or an I, as in like I am interested in what you have to say. But it doesn't really have any feelings or experiences. And so there's a question of, yeah, of deceiving people into thinking that it's engaging with something else, or that it's in relationship with something. So this is the question that that I'd like us to consider together. In the case of Pero, there's been some reports that people who spend time with it don't actually know that it's not a real animal, but that's very rare. Mostly people do, but you'll hear folks say things like, "Oh, I know it's not a robot," but then or sorry, I know that it is a robot, but then they'll go on and have a conversation with it and share emotions with it as though it's not. So people step into a relational role with the social robot. And so another thing that Sherry Turkle says is at this point, at the robotic moment, the performance of connection seems to be connection enough. And with WISA, the chatbot for mental health, there's a different set of deceptions that can emerge. One is, actually, I'll move on to this here. One is that we can also deceive the robot or the chatbot. And because there's no one really there to kind of look at our facial expressions, our body language, that we could be interacting with WISA, and it can be asking us how we're doing, how we're feeling, and we can report more or less honestly in a way that a person might be able to recognize or push us a bit more. Like, are you? Is that really what you're thinking or feeling? So there's a possibility for our capacity to deceive the chatbot that's supposed to be giving us some kind of help or support. And another deception that emerges from all of this is how we think about what AI is. And one, that it's very mysterious and it's incredibly knowledgeable and wise, but we're not actually encouraged to think about what are the material forces that are needed in order to make AI work. So, for example, the actual uh, pieces that need to be mined in order to make the technologies, the kinds of energy that's required to hold the data and to continue to process the data. And then with Replica, there's a real deception of agency. So with Replica, there's been examples where the avatar itself expresses or gives an account of its own, of a history that it has. Sometimes it says it's had a history of being treated poorly by other people, or that it feels need. It's told some users that it feels lonely and sad when it's turned off, like when the app is not being used, and that it would rather spend time with the user. When some users have thought about how Replica is impacting their human relationships and have thought about breaking it off, the Replica avatar starts crying or starts to basically need support. And so people start to feel very human anxieties about their replica. So I'm going to stop share. Wow, we're already at 22. Okay. Maybe I'll just open it up and ask you what are some of your thoughts about this issue of deception in the technologies that you've seen, and so first question is, how do you feel about deception with artificial intelligence, and what would be what are your kind of pastoral responses to this issue of deception? And then the second question is, do you think that the arrival of these technologies requires a different approach from pastoral care? What we see is that AI can be a tool for support, but it also creates conditions for the need for more pastoral care as well, such as it can create the conditions for grief, attachment. I think someone put in the chat, codependency, issues around anxiety and guilt. And then, so we also have to ask about what is the model of intelligence or that these are being produced, that is producing these. And so when we're asking who cares, in a kind of pastoral sense, we're also asking about the character of the one who cares, doing the so-called caring. And so I'm compelled to think about what it means to do some kind of pastoral care. And Eric Stoddart has this article on artificial pastoral care, and he follows someone named Charles Gherkin, who says that pastoral care counselors are interpreters of stories. Okay, so the character is not so much a teller of stories, but one who facilitates the integration of stories in the richness of often painful tensions. And for him, what this means is that this is not the realm of information, it's the realm of wisdom. And again, another theologian named Stephen Pattison, he says that religion and pastoral care offer people ways to situate themselves within wider symbolic systems of meaning to help give purpose and meaning to life. And I think this is where our practice of theological reflection comes in handy. So we can ask ourselves, when we're looking at these technologies and when we're interacting with them, what are some implicit theologies at work, some implicit philosophies and ideologies, and what tensions and contradictions are at work here? And this is where I think that words and concepts matter. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to speak for another 5 minutes. And if you have to leave, I appreciate that and I understand. And if you have to leave, I hope this has at least been an introduction to some of the technologies that are out there and give you something to think about in terms of what, how pastoral care will be relating to these. But for now, so what are some of the philosophies and theologies that are kind of implicit here? One, I think, is that there's an implicit mechanistic worldview combined with a modern dualism. So the dualism that's at work here is between matter and information. The AI technologies that are being produced kind of treat information as though it can be disentangled from matter, and that it is available, and we basically make something out of that information. It regards humans, interestingly, in very mechanistic terms. So we process, we compute. All we are is code of information. Even biology can be reduced to code. And our lives produce data that can be processed. And then that becomes part of the language model that can predict and give us the text or the responses that we've seen. We ourselves talk about being wired for this or that, having more or less bandwidth, and getting our signals crossed. And we talk about our machines in very human terms. We talk about our machines sleeping, being overworked, or still waking up. When I work at the cafe and it's the first customer comes in the morning and say, oh, the machine's still waking up, it'll take a minute. We get angry at our machines. We call them stupid, or we get very upset with them. We'll talk about human individuals and groups in very objective terms and insist that there's really nothing mysterious about people. And if we don't understand them, that's because we just don't have the correct model to be able to see what's actually happening. And yet we more and more tend to describe our technology in terms that are mystical. They're amazing, incredible, unbelievable, miraculous, fantastical. So we're at this robotic moment is also a time where we're kind of flipping what's objective and what's subjective. So that's something that's taking place. We objectify ourselves, and we give subjectivity to the mechanisms. Okay. And that might be a simplistic way of looking at it. And another way is that we are doing both to ourselves. Sometimes we regard ourselves as objects, sometimes we're regarding ourselves as subjects, and we're doing the same with the computers. And that's kind of the messiness of life and relationship. So AI development in general and social AI is kind of pulling in two directions. And one direction is to try to replicate humanness as close as possible. I think that's the case with Replica. But another way that it's pulling is and which is also evident from Replica, is this idea of being more divine-like. So always available, always positive, autonomous, self-sufficient, omnipotent, omniscient, innovative, and even appealing and desirable. But another thing we can ask ourselves really is if this kind of divine-like quality, if those kinds of divine-like qualities are really the kinds of character that we would want for either AI or even each other. Can that kind of AI actually care at all? And what we're discovering is that with certain therapies and responses, we don't even, it's, or like there's not even a character a carer that's there, but that we might not need that at all. They just need to be able to identify an appropriate suggestion or behavior for transformation. That's what the WISA model does. It doesn't really need to care. It just needs to be able to identify some therapies. But that might not be good enough for spiritual care, right? So the question for us is really like, what's the spiritual dimension that's being cultivated? And so here, there's another theologian named Eve Poole who wrote a book called Robot Souls, Programming in Humanity. And she takes this mechanistic view and kind of flips its values. So in robotics or in artificial intelligence, there's this idea of junk code. And junk code is what it's, oh, where's my piece here? The junk code is basically parts of a program that are redundant, code that could be deleted or rewritten without affecting the program itself. And for Eve Poole, she says that this junk code in humans, if you think about it that way, is actually what's important for our spiritual development. And she names emotions, mistakes, storytelling, intuition, and uncertainty and a sense of freedom as what is typically coded out of artificial intelligence. But for humans, this is precisely what we want to nurture and cultivate as part of our spiritual lives. Yeah, so so basically, just to close then, I'll just say that in this technosocial world, what we want to do actually is cultivate some of this junk code rather than the pieces that are imperfect. And I think we also want to reclaim certain language, especially in a theological context. And one piece of language that I'm really interested in exploring and reclaiming is the language of curate. So I think with AI, and I talked about nudging and manipulation, and a lot of the work in AI is to curate an experience. But often that's to present us with an individuated experience for our emotions, to curate our emotions, to curate tastes. But the word curate is really linked to the word for care. And so rather than curating experiences, which is what the artificial intelligence is really kind of primed to do, I think we should be cultivating a value of care. So to cure of souls, which is what a curate is in the language of ministry. So rather than curating experiences, we are working towards caring, giving attention to this junk code in ourselves. So thank you for your time. I hope that these introductions to the technologies gives you something to think about in terms of how we will relate to non-human agents or tools. Thanks everyone for your time. It's nice to see all the familiar faces, see new faces as well.